In our previous video, we saw how to add the transaction in a memory pool. And this memory pool is shared between the front end and our blockchain file. So as soon as the transaction is added in the memory pool, so it will be available for the miner to read and include it in a block. So in this video, we will see how to add the transaction in a block. So first, let's create a new function here. So create a function called read transaction from memory pool. And create a list. First create transaction IDs. So we are creating an empty list to store all the transaction IDs here, and it will be helpful when we'll create our Merkle root. So the next step is create another list, add transactions in block. So here we will collect all the transactions from our memory pool and then we will add them in a block. So read the transactions from the memory pool for tx in self dot mempool self dot tx IDs dot append. So for each transaction, collect the transaction ID and then self dot add transactions in block dot append. Read the transaction from memory pool and add. And that's pretty much about this function. So let's add a little documentation here. Read transactions from memory pool. Save it. And in the next step, go back to your add block function. And here we will add our transactions. So we have a Coinbase transaction as well. So we need to add the Coinbase transaction in our transaction list that we have prepared. So let's add the transaction ID first and then the transaction itself. So after this step, to self dot tx IDs dot insert 0 Coinbase transaction dot tx ID. As per Bitcoin consensus rule, your Coinbase transaction should be the first transaction in every block. So that's the reason we are setting it 0 here. And add the transaction as well, self dot add transaction dot insert 0 Coinbase transaction and save it. We'll come back to the Merkle root. For now, let's leave it as it is. When we'll create the Merkle root, then we'll make this change here. For now, just leave it. And the next step is we need to convert our transactions into JSON format, because right now these transactions are in byte format, so we need to take care of it. So let's create a new function, convert to JSON self, and create a new list, self dot tx JSON empty list, and for transaction in self dot add transaction, read every transaction from the add transaction list and convert it into JSON format, self dot JSON dot append and do tx dot to dictionary. So we already have this function defined inside the transaction module. However, we need to make some changes in this function. We'll see how to do that. And once everything is converted, we will simply replace this Coinbase to this list. So let's copy this and remove it from here, paste it, save it, and call this function after the UTXO store self dot and save. Now let's go back to the transaction module and make the changes in toDictionary function. So the first thing is we are not just converting the Coinbase transaction now, so we are converting all the transactions. So let's remove this and make it more generic and do for loop here. Now there can be multiple transactions, so we need to convert all the transactions. So for tx index transaction input in enumerate self dot tx underscore ins, and if self dot is Coinbase transaction. In Coinbase transaction, we store the block height, which is in little endian. So we need to convert that into integer. So let's do that. Do tx in script signature dot cmds, and we store it at the first place in the command, and do little endian to int tx underscore in dot script signature dot cmds 0 and save it. And next step is convert the previous transaction hash dot previous tx in dot previous transaction. Simply use the hex method to convert it into the string format. And the next step is run a for loop for index cmd in enumerate. Now we need to convert the script signature if there are any bytes in the script signature, so convert it into hexadecimal. Script signature cmds, and this is eligible for the normal transactions. For normal transactions, we have the script signature, we have the script public key, so we need to convert everything into hexadecimal format. Do if is instance cmd. So we are simply checking if there are any bytes, then convert it into hexadecimal. tx in dot script signature dot cmds and index cmd dot hex. Save it. So it will convert everything in hexadecimal format. And the next step is convert tx in dot script underscore signature equals to tx in script signature Since script signature is the object itself, so we need to convert that in dictionary and save it. And last, convert the transaction input object into dictionary. tx ins tx index equals to tx in dot dictionary. Save it, and we can remove this entirely now. And we need to modify the transaction output as well. So let's remove everything from here. Now we can have multiple transaction outputs as well. So we need to run the for loop here as well. Index tx out in enumerate self.tx outs tx out dot script public key dot cmd. We know that here we have the bytes only at the second place in the command, which is our public key hash. So we are just converting that tx out dot script public key dot cmds 2 dot hex, and now convert the script object into dictionary tx out dot script dot public key equals to tx out dot script public key dot dictionary. So this will convert the object into dictionary, and we can easily save it in JSON. And the last is convert the tx out object itself in dictionary tx outs index and tx out dot dictionary. Save it, and I think we are done with everything. Go back to blockchain module and let's check if everything is done. So we need to call this function here. So the first thing is we need to read the transaction from the memory pool. So let's call it in the first step itself and save it. And let's quickly debug it, remove all the breakpoints and set the breakpoint here and debug. For now, we know that we have nothing in the memory pool, but let's run this. Okay. Next step, keep going and add the transaction. Right now the transaction IDs are blank, and now it will add the Coinbase transaction ID here, and we have the transaction ID here. And next, the add transaction list is blank for now. You can see it here. Now it will add the Coinbase transaction as a first transaction, and let's see it quickly. Yeah, we have the transaction object here, and we'll take care of the Merkle root in the next video. For now, let's continue and mine the block. Meanwhile, let me bring up the front end as well, and we will transfer the coins from this address to this address once we have the UTXO available in self.utxo. Alright, to store the UTXO here, next step, and convert to JSON now. So let's go inside this and see what's going on. Read the first transaction and it should convert it into dictionary. Let's go inside dictionary. Okay, it is a Coinbase transaction. That's good. Okay, so we have some kind of error here. So it's a typo error. It should be CMDs, not CMD. So let's quickly fix it. And let's run it again. Let's quickly skip everything that we have already seen. Mine. Okay, go to convert function directly and hopefully it will work now. All right. Okay, it has converted everything. So let's quickly look at the object JSON, and it has converted everything into dictionary. We do not have any object now, and now I should be able to write this into JSON without any issue. So let's run this, and that's nice, it worked. Now let's transfer some coins, and transfer 10 coins. Okay, so now we should have the transaction in the memory pool. So let's go inside and see. We should have a transaction now, and yes, we do. And it will add the transaction in add transaction. Right now it should be blank, and you can see it's blank. And now we have one transaction here. So let's look at this. So we should have the transaction where we send the 10 bitcoins. Let's look at the amount in the transaction out. And yeah, that's the one. We are transferring 10 bitcoins here, and this is the change transaction where we are sending the money back to ourselves, and that's good. Let's quickly mine the block now, and here we are adding the Coinbase transaction as well as our first transaction, because as per the consensus rule, your Coinbase transaction should be the first transaction, and first we are adding the transaction ID and then the transaction itself. So let's do that. Mine the block. Okay, store it into UTXO, convert it into JSON, and it has converted everything. Now write it into our file, and perfect, everything is working fine. In our next video, we will see how to create the Merkle root.